Good to see you. Thanks for joining me. Today I would like to take a look at the recent trailer that Marvel has shared with us. This is the first official trailer for the Fantastic Four film that's coming up, and I'm very excited to see it. I work full-time as a game developer. Much of my work involves character design, and because of that work, I have studied the various decades of our recent history to understand clothing. So I will be approaching this topic as a character designer. I want to analyze the clothing and especially the outfits, which I will cover at the end of the video. The uniforms here, I will share my thoughts and analysis on those, but I also want to explain what I see in the trailer, taking into account what the characters are wearing. So I hope you are looking forward to this film, because I certainly am. So let's go ahead. We will be pausing the video at certain points, and I'll also be comparing with some examples as well. So right off the bat, I just love the aspect ratio and the corners of the screen that make it appear as an old television. So you might look at this and think, oh, this must be the 60s. So let's go ahead and pause it here, and there's a couple things that I want to take a look at specifically here. So from my perspective, I do not believe that this is the actual 60s. I believe this is sort of an alternate timeline 60s, and they seem to be leaning into the retro-futurism, which is a philosophy of what the future looked like or would look like to people of that era. So I would describe this as 1960s retro-futurism. Now, the suit that that we see Mr. Fantastic wearing here is quite telling, and this is not a genuine 60s suit. This is more of a modern suit. The telltale signs of that would be that the pants, though they are straight cut, 60s straight cut pants are generally a bit looser than that. And in general, men's suits from the 60s would actually go just a bit lower, and they would be straight and wider. These pants are a bit too narrow for that, and the arms on the suit are also significantly too narrow. The arms generally have a straight cut on 60s suits. The length of the suit is fine. It should be just probably a little bit longer, but it is the width of the arms on the suit and the lapels on the suit. The lapels on the suit are actually quite shallow. On 60s suits, generally they flare out a bit more. It's a bit hard to tell here with the detail, but you can see the narrow arms there. So I'll go ahead and bring up some examples of other suits from the 60s here. First, let's take a look at this suit here. I'll put that on screen. So we can see that these are genuine of 60s suits, and you can see the arms are actually quite loose here. Now, in this particular situation, these lapels are very, very narrow, which is extremely unusual. When you see suits from the era, generally they're significantly wider than that. So this is very unusual for them to be so shallow like that. And you will see an example of a looser fit on the pants here. You can see they sit a little bit lower. So this is quite typical of the 60s here. Let's have a look at our next images. And oh, this is really interesting. I thought we only recently invented diversity and inclusion in the 20s. I thought we just invented that, but apparently we had that in the 60s as well. So, I mean, you can see like a black guy, Asian guy. So you can see this would be more towards the end of the 60s as we have a flaring out. The flaring out of the pants became a widespread trend in the 70s, but in the 60s, the straight cut was more common, but it was towards the end of the 60s where they started to flare out a bit, and we still had these high-seated pants here. Let's go ahead and have a look at this image here, and this is a special look. Have a look at these waistbands here, but this is something that we see towards the 70s now, is this more stylized. You see these guys have had to fold the pants up on there as well. But once you become a bit more stylized and flashy, that's more indicative of the 70s, especially with the colors. In the 60s, we generally used calmer colors. Now we'll take a look at Sue's outfit. As soon as I saw this, I immediately knew this was not supposed to be set in the literal 60s. And the reason being is this suit is extremely atypical. It's very unusual for a lady's one-piece dress like this, or one-piece skirt. And the telltale sign here is the use of bitonal design. We have a stark difference in material for the shoulder area that leads down to sort of the central button column here. It is extremely unusual. Secondly, the material and the shape. This is more of a pencil skirt. It's a loose pencil skirt, which is extremely unusual because what would have been common in the 60s would be pleats. Pleats or a straight, looser fit than that. Let's go ahead and take a look at some examples here. This is quite a good example. This would be something quite similar, but you see we have pleats down there, and this is something quite tight that is very form-fitting, but it's not the one piece that we sort of see Sue wearing. This would be something very similar to what Sue is wearing, and you can see the only different use of color and material would be along the belts here, and the pockets are actually quite unusual. That is quite uncommon, as you see all the other outfits here tend to be monotonal in that they are a single color. And anything that does have different material and color is quite reserved. For example, the collar that you see here, these single sort of straight fitting on the skirts are actually quite loose. And here we have another example of that looser fit here, as you can see, whereas these pleats, the sort of romper style and pleats here, the pleats were significantly more common. So there's the straights and there's the pleating there. And this is already an excellent showcase as to how this will be unique. This means that it is not beholden to our literal 60s, which means they can draw inspiration from the era. They can evoke that sense of timelessness because we are so far removed from it. But it allows this to look different, to have a unique identifying flair to it. It has its own visual identity, and it really does stand out from other things that we see, especially in the MCU when things start to look a bit samey. Something I really like about her outfit here is that her boots are the same color as this secondary color here, which is very nice. So let's go ahead and go through the rest of the trailer now. Here we get our first close-up look at the suit that Ben Grimm wears here, and it's already pretty neat. Again, I'll discuss all of this towards the end, but I really like the look of this. It has a very tangible feel to it, and it looks like actual materials. It looks like it is made out of actual materials that could exist. We see the seam lines and imperfections and all of that. I'm really looking forward to seeing more, but I'll discuss that a little bit more. You can see we have this sort of turtleneck look towards the top, which again evokes that sense of the 60s. It gives it that old look to it. The turtlenecks that Sue is wearing there is really cool. We have little things like details like the metal buttons or fasteners there. We get a pretty good look at the suit here. And again, with the turtlenecks that just give it that unique look. There's no other MCU property that has a look like this, which is so important because this movie really does need to set itself apart from the other MCU stuff, especially since people have been a bit burned out and we are all mostly experiencing superhero fatigue. So something like this is really great to see. These pants look a little bit modern to me, a little bit too modern. They sort of have that very shallow inseam. Proper old-time 60s pants would have had a much higher seat. The belt would be up there. You probably wouldn't have that sort of coin holder pouch just there. And this is interesting because these clothes sort of look like what kids might wear in the 80s. You get a little bit of a Stranger Things vibe from what they're wearing, but it's kind of neat to see that the Fantastic Four is established enough to where there is merchandise being produced based off them, and the kids can wear these fun little outfits and t-shirts based on the Fantastic Four. This car is really cool. That is slick. This is where we really get a good look at the sense of retro-futurism, which is, again, how a particular era of our culture guessed that the future would look. This is what they thought the future would look like in the 60s, and I'm so glad to see them leaning into it. It just looks really fantastic. We get a close look, not a close, but a sort of a better look at that. Is this John Malkovich? I can't wait to see what sort of weird accent John Malkovich does. We'll just sort of do like, "Hello, it is me, John Malkovich. I will destroy this world and in its place build a new one." That's probably what his character is going to say. So I'm just going to leave this pin here. If that's the weird accent that he uses in the movie, then I'm going to buy myself a pizza to celebrate. We get a good look at Galactus. A little bit small. He seems a bit small there. So that was a really neat trailer. Let's go ahead and open this up in an image editing program, and we'll go ahead and zoom into that. Now, what I absolutely adore these uniforms. This is just fantastic. Now, the reason why I like these uniforms so much is because it is obvious that these are uniforms. Say, for example, think of your favorite sports ball team. Your sports ball team all have matching uniforms, but they look exactly the same. They are uniform. But when it comes to characters that we see on screen, especially fantasy and sci-fi and these comic book heroes, we want the characters to look different. We want them to have unique identifying traits. So how do you make them uniform but make them unique? And there are just small details. What I really like most is the different distribution of the dynamic of the colors here. So if we zoom in just a little bit, let's go ahead and have a look at the distribution of the lightest tones. These are the lightest tones that we see on the characters. We have Sue Storm with her sort of collar area. We have Johnny and his distribution of that lightest, but his collar doesn't go up as high, his turtleneck. So we have that just there. On Ben Grimm, we also have that, but because his body shape is so different, it helps him really stand out. So he has a similar color distribution, but Johnny's distribution goes down a bit farther. But we also have those ridges all along the shoulders, so it catches the light, it casts shadows and highlights in an interesting way. And we also see that on his chest area here. But we're sort of going off topic here a little bit. So you have these long gloves here. You have the long gloves here and the long gloves here, and you have the cuffs. So we have a different distribution of the highlights of the character. The boots are where we have some uniformity. They're all quite similar. The height, doesn't really matter, but this is where we have a degree of uniformity, and obviously the colors are the same. That goes without saying. We have the belts, which are all extremely similar, but Mr. Fantastic has the least amount of white, of the highlight color, and that helps him stand out. We also have the nice uniformity of the 4 badge as well, but there is enough to make it look like these uniforms are the same, but there's enough individuality in them to make them stand out on their own. I would like to see what the texture looks like on the suit. I believe there will probably some degree of a ribbing in the material in the same way that the Thing has that ribbing there. So this is it's so interesting. And obviously their suits cater to their individual powers, but there's enough differentiation in them to where they look similar. There is a problem when it comes to uniforms where if they are not well designed, then they'll just look the same. And this is so well considered. It is enough to where it is obvious that these are different characters with different body shapes and different, probably, battle properties. An example of where this was not achieved well is in the latest episodes of Dragon Ball Daima. There is a group of characters that was introduced within the past few weeks. They are a team, and all of their uniforms look the exact same. The characters' faces look exactly the same. and unfortunately they fail in having unique uniforms. Whereas this is a situation where the unique uniforms really, they did a great job on this. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing more. Are you interested in this? This looks fantastic. This is the best looking thing I've seen coming from the MCU in a very long time. Oh, I would also like to point this out. I just noticed this is the darker tones. I'll point out we have the mid-tones, the highlights, and the lightest tones, and the dark tones. And they use the dark tones just very, very conservatively, but in an excellent way. So we have it on trim here. So we have the trim, just there's for the dark tones. On the soles of the shoes, they have the darker tones, but also on the inside of the gloves, they have the darker tones. And then we also have the verticality breaking up the dark tones on the belt. Really fantastic, well considered. If they didn't have the dark tones on the inside of the gloves, it would look plain and tacky. They would look like Power Ranger gloves. This makes it look more like a part of a spacesuit or some sort of engineer suit. So this looks so cool. I'm so pleased that these designs look great. They look organic, they look natural, and it's easy for a design like this, especially with these colors, it's easy for it to look tacky. I think they did an exquisite job. So, you know what, well done to the design team. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about this. So please let me know if you're interested in seeing more about this. It's always great to chat with all of you in the comment section and just be excited about things that we enjoy. So if you'd like to see a few other videos where I discuss Marvel designs when it comes to their characters, I'll put some videos on the screen there. So thank you very much for watching. Please be well, and let's look forward to the future.